Hi girls, Ms. Gaska here. Today we're going to go over English 3 Semester 1, Week 1, Activity LC1.3, Language Checkpoint, Placing Modifiers. Our learning targets for this assignment are to place phrases and clauses correctly in sentences and to recognize and correct misplaced or dangling modifiers. So placing your modifiers correctly. So part of being an effective writer is placing modifiers so that your meaning is clear and knowing how to revise misplaced or dangling modifiers. So a modifier is a word, phrase, or clause that makes the meaning of another word or word group more specific. So it's kind of like an adjective, only it doesn't have to be just one word. So the bold-faced words and word groups in the following phrases are all modifiers. So everything that's bolded here is an example of a modifier. So the first one says an immense statue. So an and immense both describe the word statue, right? An, or I guess if you didn't have the word immense there, it would just be a statue. So a would describe statue. And then immense also describes statue. Here you have the statue in New York Harbor. So the describes statue, and in New York Harbor also describes statue because it tells us where. A statue, once again, a describes statue. That symbolizes freedom, also describes statue. Hopefully my little arrows aren't too confusing for you there. But you'll also notice that those words are all placed directly next to statue, or surrounding statue even. So modifiers should be placed near the word or word group that they modify. That's a pretty important topic, so I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. So a misplaced modifier can create confusion or sometimes even accidental humor. So modifier placement is particularly important in speeches. So when the audience is listening, they can't reread to figure out what the speaker is talking about. They can't just stop and go back and be like, hold on a second, let me slow down so I can try to see if I can figure out what that means. They have to just figure it out as the person's talking. So in the speech address on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the U.S., President FDR, or not the U.S., the Statue of Liberty, President FDR says, "We have within our shores today the materials out of which we shall continue to build an even better home for liberty." So notice he places the modifying adverb phrase within our shores and the adverb today directly after the verb have. He wants to emphasize that it's something that we do have, something that we own. So we have within our shores describes when we have it. Today describes when we, or where we have it. Today describes when we have it. So when we read the following sentences, we're going to underline the misplaced modifiers. Then we're going to rewrite the sentence, placing the modifier correctly. The first one has been done for you. So let's do this together so I could try to help you understand. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the 32nd President of the United States, who was a fifth cousin of President Theodore Roosevelt. Well, the problem with this is that it kind of makes it seem like this line, who was a fifth cousin of President Theodore Roosevelt, it makes it seem kind of like that line is describing the United States instead of describing the person, because it's directly next to the United States. Does that make sense? So it always kind of makes it seem like it's describing whatever it's next to. Everything else was perfectly fine. FDR was the 32nd President of the United States, and it's right next to each other, so that describes him. But we need to do something with the rest of the sentence. So this is how the writers of this book modified that. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was a fifth cousin of President Theodore Roosevelt, was the 32nd President of the United States. So what they did was they interrupted it with a positive clause. So this, between the commas, describes FDR, and this also describes FDR. And even though it's not right next to the person it's describing, it's still fine because the interception of the phrase between the commas, you can act like that doesn't exist, and if it still makes sense, it's still grammatically correct. So if it just said Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the 32nd President of the United States, that would be fine. So as long as that still makes sense, you're doing the right thing grammatically. I kind of want to do this one for you too, just to kind of guide you a little bit more, because this is kind of a difficult concept to understand. So we read about First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt's work championing human rights during our social studies class. So the way this is written is, okay, so we read, what did we read? We read about Franklin Roosevelt's work championing human rights during our social studies class. This kind of makes it seem like she was championing human rights during the social studies class, but that's not the case. That doesn't make any sense. What was happening during their social studies class? They were reading. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight these different parts of the sentence so that you could see it more clearly. So, we read about. So, they're telling us that the subject of the sentence is we, the action of the sentence is read, and then we're about to find out what we read about. So I'm going to put that in a separate color. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt's work championing human rights. So they read about her work where she was championing, actually, hold on, I'm going to divide that because that's got modifiers too. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt's work, and then her work doing what? Championing human rights. And then when did we read about it? We read about it during our social studies class. So here we want to try to figure out what should go where. I'm going to make these all different colors to kind of make it easier to see. I don't know why it wasn't populating for that one, but that's okay. Okay. So, what we want to do is look at what part each part of the sentence belongs to. So we read about, yes, this is what we read about. So it should go next to we read because we're trying to figure out what we read about. So what do we have to change then? It doesn't make any sense. This already goes with this. And then championing human rights, well, that's what her work was doing. So yes, that goes with that. That means that this last part must be the one that's in the wrong place during our social studies class. Well, she wasn't championing human rights during the social studies class, so it needs to go somewhere else. It needs to go next to reread. So would it make sense if we said we read about during our social studies class, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, so on and so forth? No, that doesn't make any sense at all. But we do have an alternate option, which is taking this part and putting it at the I done interrupted that other sentence. Putting it at the very beginning of our sentence altogether, so that just like in the first examples on this page, it surrounds the things that it's trying to modify. So then I'm going to rewrite the sentence correctly. During, I wanted it to go all the way over here. Let's see if I can get to that. During our social studies class, we read about First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt's work championing human rights. So now we have our modifier going with what it's supposed to be modifying, okay? So please do this one by yourself. I wonder how immigrants on ships in New York Harbor passing the Statue of Liberty felt when they saw the statue. If it makes it easier for you to highlight like I did in the previous sentence for different chunks, go ahead and do that. And then go ahead and go to the next one and do the same thing. The New Colossus, a famous poem, is inscribed on a plaque inside the base of the statue by Emma Lazarus. Actually, for this one, I'm going to tell you what seems kind of weird. I wonder how immigrants on ships in New York Harbor passing the Statue of Liberty felt when they saw the statue. So it kind of makes it seem like the Statue of Liberty felt something. Can the Statue of Liberty feel something? Who's supposed to be the one that's feeling? Why isn't it next to the people that are feeling? And then down here, the New Colossus, a famous poem, is inscribed on a plaque inside the base of the statue by Emily Lazarus. So Emma Lazarus built the statue? Like the statue is by her? Or what's being said here? So revisit each of the sentences you just revised. Pick two and describe what the original sentence literally meant. So we're not going to do that because I basically already told you. So we're going to scratch that out. Hold on. Okay, so now correcting dangling modifiers. So a modifier that does not clearly modify any word group in a sentence is a dangling modifier. While you usually can correct a misplaced modifier by rearranging the sentence, in the case of a dangling modifier, you may need to add or replace words to clarify your meaning. So sometimes a dangling modifier doesn't describe what it's supposed to be describing. So here's an example. After reading the speech, a discussion took place. So the discussion was what was reading the speech? That doesn't make any sense. We're missing something or something needs to be changed. This phrase doesn't clearly modify anything in the sentence. Discussions can't read speeches. So when it's revised, you could say, after reading the speech, we discussed it, meaning we were the ones that were reading the speech, and then we were also the ones that discussed the speech. So now the sentence is correct. That should make sense, but if it doesn't, reach out to me and ask me about it. So now we have a dangling modifier. Holding her torch for over 120 years now, we marvel at the sculptor's achievement. So wait a second. Did we hold the torch for over 120 years? Because that's what comes right after the modifier. Or did the sculptor hold the torch for over 120 years? No, they're talking about the statue, but the statue isn't anywhere near that sentence. So we have to figure out how we're going to fix that in order to make it make sense. So what they gave us was the revised sentence. The statue has been holding her torch for over 120 years now, and we marvel at the sculptor's achievement. So now it makes some sense. So here they had added words to the modifiers and following the comma with and to clarify the sentence's meaning. So now you're going to look at these following sentences and underline the dangling modifiers, then rewrite the sentences to make them clearer. So listening to the speech, eyes filled with tears and hearts filled with hope. So were the eyes listening to the speech or the hearts listening to the speech? Who was listening to the speech? So how I would do it is, I think that listening to the speech must be the dangling modifier because it doesn't tell us who is listening to the speech. Eyes can't listen, hearts can't listen, they don't have ears. So I'm going to rewrite this sentence by adding something. So I'm going to say, while we listened to the speech, our eyes filled with tears and our hearts filled with hope. So now I have we listened to the speech, meaning we're the ones that are doing the action. It now has something to support it, so it's not dangling there. It's kind of like if somebody was dangling from a roof, they need someone to give them a hand and help them back up. The stuff we added is like that hand that helps them up. So now it's up to you to do B and C and continue on. Then you're going to get to this paragraph from a student's essay about the Statue of Liberty. So it says work with a partner. We're going to work on this together. So I'm going to cross out the work with a partner part, but we're going to check whether modifiers are placed correctly and whether each clearly modifies a word or word group and underline any mistakes we notice. Then it wants us to rewrite the paragraph correcting the mistakes. But keep in mind that not all sentences contain errors. Once we're done with that, we'll be done with, we are going to go on to, we're done with that page, so we're going to go on to the last page of this activity, which is to write an explanation so that our classmate understands the mistakes in the sentence. So for this one, wanting to honor the abolition of slavery and to celebrate liberty, the statue, wait a minute, the statue can't want to do anything because it's a statue. It doesn't have a mind or anything like that. So the statue was first envisioned in 1865 by Edouard de Laboulaye. His friend, the sculptor Frederick Bartholdi, so sculptor describes friend, helped make Laboulaye's vision a reality. So that all makes sense. That sentence is fine. French citizens and U.S. citizens donated to help pay for the immense sculpture who loved the idea. Wait a minute, the sculpture loved the idea? That doesn't make any sense. Who loved the idea of commemorating the friendship between their countries. Taking years to complete the work, the statue would eventually stand over 151 feet high. So the statue took years to complete the work? That doesn't make sense either. Like a beacon of hope, we imagine how immigrants must have felt when they crossed the New York Harbor. Like a beacon of hope? We're the beacon of hope? No, the statue is. So this is the paragraph you're going to have to rewrite. Now, I'm not going to do this part for you, partially because we're running out of time and partially because I want you to practice, but I did show you where the errors are so that you know what to fix. Then after that, you go down here and follow these instructions about writing an explanation to your friend, and then you're all set. Thanks for watching.